All right. Hey, this is Dawn Marie Solis with Venice 2022, and I am over the moon excited to be talking with the Moms on the Spectrum podcast ladies. We have Kelly Guthrie and Claudia Garcia with us today, and they are becoming two of my favorite people. Their podcast is amazing. Please run out there, all the places you listen to your podcast, and listen to their podcast. But they talk about their experiences as moms of wonderful neurodivergent children. And gosh, where were you? I'm old enough, more old enough than you that you weren't doing the thing when I was doing the thing. I could have really used you. So can you please, one at a time, kind of tell us your origin story for getting together and how you created the podcast and that kind of stuff?
Sure.
Yeah. Take it away.
Okay. Well, I think we figured it's almost 5 years ago. Both of our children are, my youngest son and Claudia's middle son were both diagnosed with autism. And in the area that we're in, really, there's only one place to go for,
A diagnosis.
Right. Diagnosis, treatment, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So we go to an orientation for what we're told is ABA therapy. And do you remember how many people were in there?
There were probably about half a dozen parents that were in the room
for the orientation.
Mm-hmm.
We sat across from each other, sort of, and everybody did their introduction. We go through the orientation, and then we don't see each other for
a couple months.
Yeah, maybe even longer,
something like that. But it was like a play group, I guess, for the kids, a social group for the kids to get together. And it was funny. We just kind of walked in,
right?
And the kids, right, the therapists for the kids wanted us to meet. They said, "Oh, there's this family that we think you would be really, good with," and so they tried to put us together and introduce our kids. And of course, our kids take one look at each other and go, "Pew!"
Yeah.
But we kind of stuck together.
Right. And then we kind of remembered that we had been at the same orientation. We ended up getting into the same, what do we call it? It's like an ABA therapy. Can't even think of the word. A group, I guess.
Yeah, just kind of social group.
So we kind of took it from there. We got together on our own outside of the group, and we just hit it off. We have a lot of similarities. We found out our husbands had known each other
for years before.
Yeah, so it was this weird sort of
and kismet moment, like we were supposed to meet. So,
and we say the best thing about that whole experience was that we found each other, because we've really been super helpful to each other.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that I think is really funny when we talk about, this group experience that we were in together, we were really apprehensive to talk about the negative experiences. So when we got together outside, just the four of us, we started drinking. We had a little drink and we're like, "Hey, how do you really feel about this whole thing that we're going through with the kids?"
Yeah.
And of course we just, it was like word vomit. We just started, going about all the different things that we were experiencing, and just realizing that we had so much in common, and especially that we didn't care for the group that we were in. It just wasn't working for us. And so, we just, I think years later, right after the group, we have always been hanging out, just been friends. And we finally, I remember Kelly contacted me. We were texting and just going back and forth, and just so frustrated with everything that was going on with our kids and wasn't going on, with our kids. And finally, Kelly just said, "You know what? We should do a podcast. That's what we should do. And we should talk about our experience." And I said, "You're right. We should. Why aren't we doing this?" And the rest is history.
Yeah.
Here we are doing it.
That's amazing. I'm having so many thoughts right now. My little psychology brain is going nuts over, ooh, I want to like hear what those conversations were. Listen
to the podcast.
Right. So I think one of the things that may have happened to anybody listening to this is that the second ABA got mentioned, their brains melted, because there are going to be a lot of folks watching this who are not a fan.
Yes. Same.
And, you know, I want to be clear and compassionate that though much of the community may not feel that ABA is right for them, there are people who do feel it's right for them, and we're going to be respectful of that. So we're not going to go off on an ABA bashing tournament. But if there are ways that we can talk about your experience a little bit, just in terms of not the therapy as an ideology, but what your experience was. What were you experiencing that wasn't meeting your needs? What were you craving instead?
Right. Do you want to go first, or? So
yeah, you go.
For us, for me and my husband personally, I think we were really hoping for our son to find ways of coping with the just, I think at the age that he was when he got diagnosed, I think there was a lot of things that were really just kind of coursing through him, and things that we were just ignorant of. We didn't know how to help him. And we were really hoping for someone to just say, hey, everything that's going on with your son is completely normal. Here's, you know, what you guys, some tactics that you guys can try, some things that you, you know, things that you can help him with, or things that just really aren't a big deal. I know that you're frustrated with it, but really it's not a big deal. That's what we were hoping for. Instead, we found that I'm trying to be as respectful as I can. We found that the therapists, and I use quotations because come to find out that here in the area that we are in, the people that they employ at this agency do not need to have any kind of certification or education, knowledge. They basically take them off the street. I hate to use that term, but really that's what they're doing. And just found out that they didn't have any experience. And so why am I using this person who doesn't know any better than I do how to help my son? And for me, in the 16 months that we were in this program, we had 4 separate therapists. And it was just very negative. The whole thing was just negative. And I think that, you know, if we were better at researching, we probably would have been able to find that out on our own without putting ourselves through that experience.
Yeah, I would say probably a very similar thing. Our kids were 10 when they were diagnosed, and similar thing. We wanted, I think when you first get that diagnosis too, you want to do anything you can, anything and everything. For us, so we homeschool, so our schedule was a little bit more open. And, you know, I know for Claudia and Orlando, it was, you know, you get home from school and work and the therapy starts, it's 3 hours. We did 3 hours Monday through Friday, and our therapist would come at 8 in the morning until 11. And she was a 20-year-old student, like psychology student. I think what was happening too, my kid for sure was going through puberty, like pre-teen. There was all this stuff happening. And, you know, the 8 to 11, I don't know. It just really was, I think like Claudia, there were a couple of times when I said, okay, well, what happens? I know he's starting to go through puberty. How is that going to look? And of course, you know, she's 20 years old. She hasn't had any training in it. She didn't know what it was going to look like. Both Claudia and I have said we're dying to talk to someone that uses ABA or used ABA and it worked for them. Because at one point we were both like, did we even get ABA therapy? We weren't even sure. But it was very, you know, if he was sick or she was sick and couldn't make the therapy, then we would have to make it up by staying, you know, she would stay an extra hour. And I mean, that's a huge chunk of time.
It's just very invasive, we felt.
I mean, I guess the other thing too was, you know, part of a difficulty for my child for sure, and I know for a lot of people in the same situation, is that it's hard for them to bond with someone sometimes. You know, they're trying to figure out, how do I bond with that person? And just the nature of ABA, where, you know, she was not allowed to have a meal with us. Like if she came right in at breakfast time, she couldn't eat breakfast. We couldn't give her a birthday card, you know, anything that, so it's almost like confusing, you know, this is how you're a friend to someone, but then you can't, you know, one day we were just happened to be making cupcakes and, oh, it's your birthday. We had no idea it was your birthday. So we had to be sort of sneaky about, you know, just even saying happy birthday to her. So, you know, yeah, if there is anyone that would love to talk to us about ABA therapy that worked for them, I want to talk to that person, because I would love to, you know, share that with listeners who may be struggling with that too. So I'm just putting it out there. If there is anyone, we do want to talk to someone about that.
And I think that's generous and appropriate. You know, I really love Marie Montessori's concepts of education.
Yes.
And there are some Montessori schools that do an absolutely brilliant job. And there are unfortunately Montessori schools that do an abysmal job.
Yeah.
The poor Montessori schools shouldn't be the representation of the concept of Montessori education. But if you're there and it's not working for you, how do you know? Right? How do you get your experience? And so, you know, I appreciate that you're putting a legitimate and sincere call out there. You know, if there are people out there that feel they've had a good experience, to know why. And maybe this is a moment where we can talk a little bit about, you know, ABA is a behavior first concept in terms of therapy. And I am not personally someone who enjoys that perspective. I got asked a question by one of our speakers, you know, how would you describe neurotypical? And I don't have a description for that. And interestingly enough, it's very hard to find any kind of description. It's basically what isn't autism or what isn't neuro. It's like,
exactly.
You know, you learn in like third grade that you can't define a word by using the word, and every definition of neurotypical says typical.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't think even the world has an idea of what that means. And so when we're talking about behaviors, helping a neurodivergent person approximate whatever quote unquote are appropriate behaviors, who has decided that behavior? Correct. Yeah. And so one of the things I use is, you know, if you look up diagnostic criteria for autism, you know, may struggle with eye contact is in there. Okay. Well, for Western English speaking society, we have decided it is rude if you do not look somebody in the eye. That people who are eye gaze avoidant might be dishonest, might be trying to get away with something, right? However, there are societies on this planet where, depending on your class, your station in life,
Mhm.
you would not look someone in the eyes. That is
right.
reprehensible, abhorrent behavior. Okay, so how do we behaviorize autistic therapies if our standards of behavior are different? So
Right.
for me, behavioral therapies are not my favorite because they tend to be based on cultural norms for the moment, which don't even work north to south, east to west in the United States.
Right.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Right,
It's true.
Right? They don't even work neighbor to neighbor.
Mhm.
I was raised with my dad reading politeness rules at the dinner table, right? I know way too many politeness rules, which bakes my poor little autistic brain. Right. So, and then I would go to a neighbor's house and, somebody who was my friend in high school, they described their politeness rules as pool rules. If one foot's on the ground and you can reach it, go for it at the table. Right. And this was one of my first experiences with, you mean not everybody has the same rules at the table? Like
Right.
my poor little autistic brain was like, I don't know how to handle this universe. You can do it differently, right? So, I mean, who chooses the behaviors? Who
Yeah.
decides?
Yeah.
And I was a very compliant child, which meant I didn't stand up for myself in situations where I needed to stand up for myself.
Right.
Mhm.
And it also meant nobody noticed my neurodivergence.
Yeah.
So I did not have help for things I needed to have help with.
Yes.
I was in abuse situations that I shouldn't have been in, right?
Mhm.
But wasn't my behavior so good?
Right. Right.
Right.
Yes.
So again, taking the specific therapy name out of it, for me, and it sounds like the two of you agree, behavior first approaches, for us at least, aren't our favorite when it comes to our children. So
Right.
I'm going to climb down off of my soapbox and get back to the two of you and ask, if not behavior, then what?
Well, I think honestly, at least for us, that's the point that we are. We are seeing a therapist, but it's not like neurodivergent specific. I think now we're getting into this crazy little thing. We're full on into puberty with our kids, and so half the time, I think I'm saying, is this puberty? Is it autism? Is it ADHD? Is it anxiety? So I think definitely in our case, there's so many other things that are happening that, his brain is just, it's got a million things happening in there and he doesn't know. So I mean, right? We've asked ourselves, okay, ABA therapy isn't the way to go for our family and our children, but what is there? What else is there?
Right. Right. And I think unfortunately here, in our specific area, so in southern New Mexico, there's really not anything beyond ABA, or just like talk specific, therapy.
Right.
Obviously there's speech, there's OT, there's that. However, here you do have to have a diagnosis in order to get into those programs. For my daughter, my youngest, she's in the process of getting diagnosed. She has an appointment in October. So we're waiting for those, and now that we just started homeschooling my two youngest, that's something that I'm really starting to notice is like, you know, the audio perception difficulties that she's having, you know, the physical therapy because she's constantly walking on her toes. You know, we're trying so many different things, you know, where with my two sons, my oldest son, he does identify, but he hasn't been diagnosed. My middle son, though, so he has been. Now with them, it was very behavior specific for me because I think I was stuck in that parent mode, like everything has to be perfect. Why are my children acting like this? Why am I doing that? And I have worked so unbelievably hard to step away from that, you know, to let my children, and I'm seeing that with my daughter, to let my children be who they are going to be without my constant, you know, my neuroses on them.
Right.
So I've been trying really hard to step away from that and let them be and let them flourish and just enjoy being children, period. So
it's a minefield. I mean,
I know,
you know, and I think
tiptoe.
that's one of the things with the podcast that we wanted to do was, you know, we both remembered how we felt. And I mean, I basically turned to anyone that I knew. Everybody, I'm sure other parents can identify with this. They were on the internet, just researching, and you're finding all this. It's so much. And so, you know, we said it would have been nice to have another parent or parents tell us, well, this was our experience. It may not be yours, but, you know, some things to think about and realize that, again, they're, you know, like you said, we're all human. And I think one of the things that basically came out of it was looking at our kids and saying, you are an amazing human being.
Right.
Like, you know, I think we were focused so much on helping them and what's not working and what's going wrong that I think we finally just, I mean, I feel like I want to cry every time I think about this, but it's like, you know, you're an amazing human being and look at all the things that you do that are like nobody else, you know? And I think just helping parents understand that they're not the only ones and it's okay to have days where you're, you know, crying your eyes out and other days when you just want to just hug them. So, you know, like squeeze them,
right.
Because they're amazing.
Right.
And yeah, I think it can just be very, isolating too. I mean, I think we feel so fortunate that we found each other because I love, you know, my friends and family, but I have nobody else that knows exactly what I'm going through. And I mean, all the time we'll make a plan and then one or the other is like, well,
this happened today.
Yeah,
so
we're running late or we're not going to be able to do this because this is happening. And there's no judgment. It's like, oh my gosh, can I help you with anything? No problem. You know? Yeah. So I think it's important for other parents to know that, you know, people are going through the same thing.
Oh my, I agree. Especially because I didn't understand my own identity as a neurodivergent person, and I did not understand my children. I took on so much shame and guilt.
Yes.
And tried so many things to behavior manage my children.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why I get a little skin crawly around the idea of behavioral approaches, because I know how wrong it was for my children.
Yeah.
Right.
The more I tried to manage, insist on create specific behaviors, the harder everything got.
Yeah.
Or the more defeated. I have 3 children. You know, each one of them responded differently to my need for people to behave the way I was told they were supposed to behave.
Yes.
And, you know, what I've been learning in the last number of years since understanding my identity and really getting into this work and looking back on, like, my oldest refusing to sit any other way but feet tucked underneath.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And me being raised, remember that book of Manners at the Table, right? Me being raised with, that's not how you sit at the table.
Right. Sit on your bottom.
Down and right. But I was never comfortable like that. I was going out of my mind at the table because, you know, if I'm going to sit naturally, I've got like coming on my knee up.
Yeah.
Right.
I have literally, before I got on recording with you, I have these little like under the desk bike pedals, and I was like slunched way down here, and my little legs are going like this. Right, I'm trying to get some energy into my body, but my upper body's not having it.
Yeah.
The more I let myself be myself, and I look back at these tiny people who I was trying so hard to raise
Yes.
well,
Right.
Yeah.
but with all the wrong information.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
Same.
So I'm working on another book, and the working title right now is "I Love My Children, I Hate Being a Parent." And
That's our black.
Oh my gosh.
and I think people either who are neurodivergent, because I was a neurodivergent person trying to raise other people with my sensory, 3 children who wanted physical attention, and I was sensorily overloaded.
Yes.
Please don't touch me.
Yeah.
You know, all of the things, and having adult meltdowns and not understanding what they are and feeling all the guilt and shame and all that, right? So I don't hate being a parent. I don't. But I'm so uncomfortable, sometimes extremely so, with the things that come with being, even as they are adults, right? Because stuff's extra hard for us. Stuff's extra.
Mhm.
Right.
Extra. It's like all the time.
Right.
It's like extra.
Yes.
You can be asleep and it's still extra.
Yeah.
Right. And you're nodding your head. So like, you know, when you've had those experiences, you kind of know. And I am trying very hard to be the person I've always been, which is to be brave enough to be viciously criticized so that hopefully somebody else will not feel so alone. Right. So that's why that working title that will probably make a lot of people just super squeamish, right? You let your kids be being a parent. Seriously, what kind of gross human are you? It'll probably land with that title because, like you said, we've got to acknowledge that there are these gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful moments that make it all worth it.
Yeah.
Right.
Kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I mean, yeah, and then the next moment you're like, okay, what happened there? That was
I
a
know.
quick like, oh, this is great.
Right.
You know. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you communicate to your children your extraordinary, exceptional love and awe at their beauty and intelligence and extraordinary beings when your hair's on fire and you just want everybody to please at least put a freaking toy away?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
I find one more half-eaten bagel under your bed. I'm burning the house down.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Same.
Yep.
Same.
No. And I think it's like that for so many parents that, you know, are just like, why does everyone else's kids do this? No, they don't. The other kids don't do it either. You know, we're all struggling with the same thing, you know. It doesn't make you a bad parent. It doesn't make you
A bad person.
No,
either.
you're a good person.
I am a good person.
Claudia. We had a episode where that's what she's like, I'm a good person.
I know. I try anyway.
So
It doesn't always happen.
yeah.
But no, I get it. It's, you know, you're so focused on the things that your children, you know, are doing, I guess, quote unquote wrong.
Yeah.
And then they come and they hug you and they give you that little bit of love and everything's hunky dory for the next 5 minutes. And then they do something else that you're like, what are you thinking? Why did you do that? But no, I get it.
Or they turn around and they just do something that's so, every now and then mine will say something that's so profound that I'm like, oh my God, like, how did you even, something I just never thought of. And he'll, you know, say something and I'm like, oh my God, like, why was I freaking out a minute ago? Look at this. Like, he's figured that out, or you know, he's made me feel better about something, or I don't know. I sometimes look at him and I'm like, you're amazing. And I don't know how that amazing made it through all this other stuff that's been going on, but it did, you know?
Yeah.
And then he doesn't put the dishes in the dishwasher the next moment. So it's, you know, it's like, I don't know.
Yep.
We don't have an answer.
Yeah, and I think the same things that probably you both decided weren't working for you about a behavior first approach to your therapy, you're discovering also doesn't work in your parenting.
Right.
However, isn't that how we're all raised?
Yeah.
Behave, right? Like, we're raised with rules of personhood. And then for the autistic brain that needs things to be consistent and patterned and all of that stuff, we look at the adults and we're like, yeah, you people don't follow any of those rules.
No,
Right?
right.
And my son is so good at reminding us, you know, if we give him, like, you know, you're not supposed to do that. You shouldn't do that. And he always says, why? Who says so? Who says so? Like, who made up that rule? That's a stupid rule. I don't know why we're doing that. So he's very good at reminding us. And, you know, one thing that I think we've really prided ourselves on as far as parents, something that we've, you know, recently started doing with our kids is making sure that they know that they can tell us when we're wrong and not making it a big deal or like be mad at them. And so when my oldest will come to us and say, you know what, you guys suck right now. You guys are being really off. Like, I don't know what it is with you two and your energy and what you're doing, but I don't like what you're doing. And I don't like how you're acting with us. So can you fix it? And that is extremely humbling when your spawn tells you that you're doing things wrong, you know, but you have to listen, right? You have to listen. That's just got to do it.
Yeah.
So how do you respond to, this is a very selfish question. How do you respond to the people that tell you you're being too permissive?
Oh yeah.
If you, that's like, you know, if you let your kid tell you you're wrong, you're not raising them to be respectful. If you just sort of let them, you're homeschooling them now, what? You couldn't like make sure they'd follow the rules. They're never going to make it as adults. You're going to make them codependent humans.
Right.
All of those criticisms. Do you have a kind of a set of responses you feel confident with, or are you still working that out for yourselves?
I think for the most part, I just say, so, and according to who? Who's, I don't understand. I don't understand the question.
Yeah.
You know, like, what does it matter? If they're healthy and, you know, strong and independent, then who are we to tell them that they're wrong? I just
basically will say to someone it's none of their business. And, you know, I very politely say, you know what, it's not for everyone. Not everyone is able to, you know, homeschool. Not everyone is able to do that. And I totally understand it. I'll admit I'm snarky sometimes. Well, I kind of gauge it. Are they really like interested in how this is working? Or are they just, because I think what happens is a lot of people, when you say, I'll say, oh, we homeschool. The first thing out of their mouth is, oh, we could never do that. So it's almost like, sometimes I wonder if it's their own shortcoming, their feeling of shortcoming. Like, well, wait a minute, why can that parent do it and I can't? Is it? And so you know, it's hard to tell where they're coming from. But if it is something where they're very, you know, critical, just ready to sort of judge me for that, that's when I'm like, well, it's none of, you know, it's none of your business. Or it's not for everyone. And you probably couldn't do it. If you say you can't do it, you probably can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's why you're not doing it, you know? So yeah, I haven't really had a lot of experience with people. What's happening now is my kid has always been big. My husband is a giant, and my kid looks older than he is. And so there were definitely times, I remember we had him in a swim class, and I think he was like 4. And I swear to you, all the kids were like this tall, and then there's mine. And I got a lot of weird comments like, why is he just taking swimming now? And I'm like, he's 4, you know?
Right.
And that was really the one time when I just felt like, you know what, you're making assumptions just looking at one specific time, and you don't know what the big picture is. And I will say that because of that, that's made me it's made me say, wait a minute, you're just looking at something happening in one specific point in time. You're not looking at a whole picture for something. So it's also made me really sort of sympathetic, or made me realize, don't make a judgment because I don't know really what's going on. Now I'm much more likely to ask a mom if they're having trouble. Is there anything I can do to help? You know, like, I'm sorry you're having a bad day. So I remember those looks of, why is he throwing a tantrum, or why? And it's just kind of like, you don't know. So I think that's kind of how I handle it. I think in the beginning, we got a lot of the whole, like, none of our friends homeschooled, Oh, and then they also think that either your child, your family is like a weirdo family that lives like in the hills and doesn't socialize with anyone, or they think that your kids are graduating from MIT at 5. Right. So it's like this one extreme. There's no in between, right? Do you find that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So,
one of the reasons why I've structured Innis the way I have, where it's not just education, it's not just parents, it's not just anything, it's everybody, is because I think my theory, we'll see if it works. My theory is that if we stop talking to our inner circles and we start talking to people that we wouldn't normally talk to, that we expand our knowledge base and our connection base, then we'll be able to avoid some of that, at least in our own community. Right now I'm very involved on social media in the neurodivergent spaces, and I have to breathe through the word policing and the ideology policing and stuff like that, and make choices about, do I explain why I made that choice? Do I, and I've chosen to be as appreciative as I can that somebody is trying, right? Often the most aggressive word policer is speaking from their trauma.
Yeah.
So I just try wherever I can to find our point of agreement and be as kind and compassionate as I can, or know when maybe this isn't a moment to even respond. Just let them have the thing that they said.
Yeah.
But we are a community throughout the world, whether we are neurodivergent or we're caregivers or we're parents or we're, this whole group of folks. It's 2022. And you both just said, we don't have an alternative for therapy for our children.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So we can decide to get mad at each other about who says neurodiverse and who says neurodivergent and who says high functioning and who says Asperger's. We can get mad at each other.
Yeah.
For good reason.
Right.
Right? Own your truth. Own that just really rips your hair out. However, we don't have a shared vernacular yet.
Right.
We don't even have that.
Right.
We can't even know what we mean when we say the same words.
Yes.
I think it's so interesting. We started this podcast in November. So we haven't even been going at it for a year. And every time we get together and sit down to podcast, we are learning just exponential amounts of information. And it comes from, we're both following different autistic and neurodivergent voices on all different platforms. And I think I say it all the time that I love, love, love TikTok, because you can see their face when they're talking, and not just like on Twitter, not on, Instagram with the little, pictures and you just scroll through. But you can really see that autistic voice. You can see that neurodivergent person speaking and talking and giving you their take on everything that they're going through and their experience. And nothing matches that right now for me. It's just like blows my mind, all of the different words and techniques and just everything that you learn from these voices. And that just started happening in November.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and we've known that our children are, autistic or neurodivergent for years.
Yeah.
Right.
About
like
6 years now.
And even before that, we knew that our children, we knew it, but we just never thought to move beyond our family and our children and see what else is out there. What is everybody else experiencing? And I think that's what we want to do in this podcast, is go as far and wide as we possibly can, helping people learn and grow in this space.
Yeah. And I think, we've talked to a lot of different people. We've had 2 teachers on. We've had our older children, our older sons on. We've had a single dad.
Father.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, those conversations have just been so enlightening for both of us. And we've learned so much. And it's always interesting to hear perspectives and experiences other than our own, because I mean, almost every time I come away with it thinking, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. Or, it's just, so that's really what we're kind of working on more with the pod is getting more, just different voices also on there. So, I think it, like you said, there's a whole wide world out there. It's not, and I remember when we first got the diagnosis, and it was like, do I call him autistic? Do I say he has autism? Do I use neurodivergent? And I remember a couple times people that's not what you say, they're autistic, or no, he has autism. And it was so confusing. Yeah. And, here you are just trying to figure out what you're doing and what this is all about. And somebody's telling you you're using the wrong terminology, but then another person's like, no, you're using the right. I mean, it's just like all over the place. And so, it's very, I think, like you said, the more people that you talk to about their experiences, I mean, that's how you make changes. That's how you stop really fighting, for lack of a better word. You stop
each other.
Yeah, arguing, and you stop. I mean, that's not really what the argument's about. It's about how can we help or make everyone's life, the best that it can be. And it's going to look different. It's going to look different for us. It's going to look different for me and Claudia both. Like, this is what's, going to work. It might not work for her, but it works for me. So yeah, that's after, I think the last few guests that we've had on, we've sat down and we were like, we should have guests all the time. We have a little party when we have a guest. So it's kind of nice. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Being able to talk to other folks is just such a gorgeous experience. Like being able to talk to the 2 of you. I mean, by the time, I keep joking that I'm an addict, I can't stop lining up people to do these little recorded things for the conference. Because how can you? I keep finding amazing people, right? I've got more than 30 people now.
That's awesome.
Sharing their experiences from the US, the UK, and Australia, and from all different perspectives.
Yeah.
And one of the main sponsors of the conference, I sat down and had a super heart-to-heart because their ICDL, their wonderful therapy for individuals with disabilities, floor time, if you've ever heard of floor time. And I love so much about them. But before we chose to partner in this way, we had to talk to each other because we don't agree. The current president of the organization feels very, very deeply that autism is a disability and a disorder. And I feel very strongly that it is a neurotype that may have accompanying disabilities and disorders. And we had to talk that through because the stated theory of the conference is what I just expressed because, I designed the conference. I get to say what it does. But I also want to make sure that the conference represents the open mind and open heart that I'm trying to create in our society. And, where the two of us landed was we're not interested in changing each other's perspective.
Right.
We are interested in finding ways we can work together to make people's lives better.
Yep.
Excellent.
And I got very happy with the idea of us being able to step out and, be that, I don't want to say example. I don't know. That sounds like highfalutin or something. I'm not trying to be like better or like teach anybody anything. That's icky to me. But I do want to just sort of want to be one of the photos in the photo book of things you can do that work. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to, we don't have very much time left. I want to sort of float an idea and see what you do with it. When you were talking about the idea that there just doesn't seem to be the kind of supports you would hope to have. Anybody who watches this video might have an idea.
Yeah.
Might know a person. It's one of the things that's been so beautiful. Is every time I talk to people, they're like, "Oh, do you know about this person?" Which is why I'm addicted.
Right.
To talk, but so like I'm talking to people about hypermobility. I'm talking to people about interior design. I'm talking to people about therapeutics. I'm talking to all these wonderful people. Who do you want to hear you? And what do you want them to hear? Like if you're sending out your request, I need to find for my family, for myself, and for my children, a therapy, a support, a design for society, right?
That's a deep.
Who do you want to hear you and what do you want them to hear?
Yeah. I think right now, the need or the worry in the back of my mind is the DD waiver. So the disability waiver, right? What makes me angry is the fact that here in New Mexico, it went from an 15-year wait. It's a 15-year wait to get on that program. And just recently, in the last year or two, it has come down to an 8-year wait. So that was championed, right? That was like, oh my God, look at how wonderful it is. Look at, they're finally putting money towards this. So Kelly and I decide that we were going to go down and we were going to put our children in that program, because we worry about the things that will happen when we are not here.
Right.
Will our children be able to take care of themselves? Can they get and hold jobs? Can they do that? And if they can't, what's going to happen? How do they support themselves? So that's why we want to go through this DD waiver program. So when we start the process, we realize that our children are not autistic enough, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are going to have a program for people with a diagnosis, then it should be for people with a diagnosis, not for people who meet this very narrow window. And I cannot express to you how unbelievably frustrating it is to meet those roadblocks constantly as a parent, constantly. And maybe it's just here in New Mexico. So that, okay,
it makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
Right,
You know
but
what
not.
I mean? It's like,
No, it's not only not just New Mexico, it's not just the United States. Because of talking to people in other English-speaking countries, I'm hearing about the hardships right now. England is battling new laws that criminalize the parents if the children don't go to school. So can you imagine a school avoidant child, right?
Yeah.
Like literally put the parents in jail if the child doesn't have enough attendance at school. Can you imagine the stress on the family? You know, when I say sort of tongue in cheek that I hate being a parent, that's why.
Exactly.
The absolute terror that
Mhm.
somebody's going to decide I'm not taking care of my children, and then they are going to start deciding what my children need and should have, and they will take over and not do it right. The deep, constant fear that some agency or person or whatever is going to start deciding, I don't know my children and they do.
right.
Um,
That's terrible.
Right.
and so, yeah,
But
the idea that somebody isn't autistic enough
yes.
is one of the reasons why I land in it's a neurotype with potential accompanying disorders and disabilities. Because if you're autistic, you're autistic.
Right.
You're not more autistic or less autistic.
Right.
You're autistic, right?
Yeah.
If you're ADHD, you're ADHD, right?
Right.
We may present differently. We
Right.
may have different skills and different hardships,
Right.
but we are who we are.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I wish we could get people to understand that.
Yeah.
So however we can do that, and whoever we can reach to help make that happen.
Well, and just have, you know, what other things can we do? Like you said, just because, you know, if you're autistic, but our kids are autistic and they're different, you know, and it's the same thing. Like Claudia said, I lie awake at night and I think, what is going to happen when I'm gone, when we're gone?
Yeah.
You know, is he going to have a job? Is he going to be able to figure out how to pay bills? Like, who's going to take care of him if he needs that? And I just feel like, oh, great. Well, if ABA works for you, great. That's great. And it works. But what about the people that doesn't? Like, what else is there? You know? And I mean, we've said time and time again, if we could figure this out, we would maybe figure it out for our own kids, but is it going to apply to anyone else? And so, yeah, I think just sort of understanding that there are more neurodivergent people than people realize. You know what I mean? I think they think, oh, I get it all the time. Well, he doesn't seem autistic. He doesn't look autistic. And I'm like, oh my God, are we still saying that? Like, are you trying to make me feel better about it? Because that's not helping, you know? And it's just realizing that, I don't know, that they have so much to give, you know what I mean? And I say all the time that they could figure out peace in the Middle East, or just set them in a room and let them just suss it out, and they would figure it out, but they're hampered, and they're stopped from that just because they don't fit into, like you said, what somebody decided was normal, what somebody decided was typical. So I mean, I think I want other people to hear us say, it's not, I don't like it looked at like a problem, like, oh, this is a problem that we have to solve. It's, I don't know. I mean, I don't have any idea what that would look like. So I'm the first to say, I don't know what the answer to that is, but certainly there's so many smart and amazing people who, including they're neurodivergent. What we need to start listening to them. Like, what makes you feel comfortable learning? What makes you feel, and it's different for everybody, but to say this will make you comfortable, it's not right. I think we've talked about, like you said, just listening to people who are experiencing that and understand. So I guess understanding, I want people to really listen.
Yeah, I had a young person tell me about how they wanted to take photos with their phone of the board and the slide projections and stuff like that, so that they could they didn't have to write it down in class, because the act of writing it down in class meant they couldn't hear what was going on.
Right.
But if they could take a snapshot of it and listen, when they went home, they would understand what it meant.
Sure.
And that was me, but I'm too old. I would have had to have brought my little 35 millimeter like brownie camera, winding the film, and
Yeah.
5 weeks later I'd have my, right. So we have these beautiful bits of technology that almost all of us are carrying around with us. And the teacher's response was, if I let you, I'll have to let everyone.
Right.
And my thought was,
So?
and why is that a problem?
Yeah.
Why? And I think one of the things that we are stuck in is that it is not just the neurodivergent community that is hampered by a behavior first approach. I think we all are.
Yes.
And it limits our ability to understand how we learn, how we think, how we process, how we understand our emotion. It literally hampers basically everything about us, because success in the behavior model is not necessarily success for the person.
Right.
And we don't know. The only people we know are the people who don't succeed, right?
Right.
The problem children, we know that it's not working for them, but we decide they are the problem.
Right.
And so if I'm hearing you both correctly, you're asking for two things, possibly in this order, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. One is, please start learning from the neurodivergent community what their experience is, what would help them thrive, and then start working with that community to make it happen.
Yes.
Yes.
And if we are going to provide supports, do not punish people for not being in desperate situations.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
All right.
Way to sum it up.
Yeah. I wish we would have
so
said it like
I
that. I'm like, that makes way more sense than what we said.
No. It's thank you. And I thought you did an amazing job, which is how I understood what you meant, right? You had to do a good job so that I could understand what you meant. Thank you both so much. I foresee much more for us to do in the future. Thank you for doing your podcast. Thank you for sharing who you are in such an honest and open way. And thank you for doing everything in your power so those awesome humans that you are privileged to grow up with, your kids, can think of themselves as worth the effort and capable, right? We are all capable with all of the things we struggle with,
Absolutely.
Yes.
right? There isn't a single human on the planet, not one, that isn't capable of some stuff and not capable of other stuff,
Absolutely.
right? And so without being ableist, without, being overly Pollyanna and they can just do everything, right? No, we can't do everything.
Right.
Right.
Nor should we be required to do everything.
Right.
Right.
But let's figure out what we can do and really enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you both. This has been a privilege.
No,
Thank you.
for us.
Thanks
Thank
for
you so
having
much.
us.
Yes.
You bet.